All right, hey, here we are, Lab 5 demo. Um, yeah, we have a lot of things to cover today. Remember this is the last unit for now, fifth unit. We have a lot of sort of perhaps too dense topics to get through, but I'm going to show you the sort of the practical stuff to extract from the lecture. We have some things to talk about in logic flow, a little bit of if statements, a little bit of for loops, specifically for of. I'm not going to spend too long on the manual for loops because we're trying to do the things that are useful for you for the labs and for going forward. Talk a little bit about arrays because we need to talk about how nested structures work. We'll just touch on objects and their properties again because that comes up a lot. You've seen it before for sure, but we'll make sure it's obvious. And then events. Events are interesting. We've been using them for a while, but we're going to talk about custom events using event listeners. And then we'll get into some Vue.js stuff. And I'm going to keep it pretty basic, of course, but I think that we have the whole idea of there's data that lives in the back end, and there's a view that the user sees in the front end, right? And we'll go through an example. We'll build ourselves something, and we'll touch on some of these different element bindings to make things interesting. So first, let's get our little thing up and running. I'm using VS Code today. It's probably the most viable and useful text editor these days for all of basic coding stuff. It's not a full. You can have like things like running command line stuff in here and all that kind of cool stuff, but by default, it's really more of just like a text editor with lots of good features. It's one of the good features of these kind of text editors that are more integrated are things like completion. We're gonna write our basic page, and we're gonna just hit tab whenever it seems like it's gonna complete. Look how it's already building everything. We're gonna build the head. Don't need a tab. I'm gonna do a style because we're gonna need to talk about style a little bit, and we're gonna do a body, and we're gonna do at least one script. And there we go. We should probably have a div in here of some kind. All right, we got a basic file. Heck yeah. We're going to open that. Let's see. I've actually forgotten how to do this. I think I have to open it in... We'll open with. Maybe we'll do it. No, that's trying to open it in here. HTML. We'll just get it in the File Explorer. Popped up in this window. Double click. Here we are. A nothing page with nothing in it. There's nothing here. Save it, reload it. All right, good. We have a functional page. We're gonna work from here. Oh, I hate that feature of Windows, y'all. Hate it so much. Okay. So let me get to our first topic. All right, I think for this we will start just in the console. Pop open the console here. Well, I guess it's gonna stay the same size over there. And we're just going to talk about some logic flow stuff for ifs and loops. And in fact, right away, I can add a couple of thoughts here. We need to at least talk about some conditions. So one of the main ones you use in most if statements are going to be the equality operator. So the idea of testing if two things are the same. Let me rephrase that. Equality is equal, right? And let's actually do that real quick. What is equal? If we remember, we're converting the state of the world in terms of numbers or strings or values into true or false conditions. We're checking on conditions. So, is 10 equal to 10? It is. You can actually see it even pops up underneath. All right, is 10 equal to 11? It's not equal to 1 either. All right, good. That statement will return true or false. So if we're going to use branching logic, let's do this. If 10 equals 10, console.log, banana, what should happen? If I run this logic branch, what should happen? Well, we have a conditional in there evaluating to true, so it should actually log banana. Great, it done did it. Now what if I change that to 11? It should do nothing. which it did do nothing. It did nothing because the logic evaluated to false, so this piece of code does not fire. So where we're going to use this in the future is we're going to use, like, for example, a variable. So var x, well, we'll just say var cond in case we want to use too many variables in here. We're going to start it at true, right? And what we can do now is we can say if cond, then we're going to do also console.log banana, right? Well, banana, that's fine. So cond is currently true, so it evaluates to true and it does the dang thing. What if I change to false? It doesn't do anything, right? So this is where we're getting to a place where you're seeing the abstractions coming in here, right? You can keep, custom building this into more and more interesting structures. Let's jump back over to our actual code, and let's do this by way of a function that we want to do something. Let's try to do something like the guessing game function we saw in the lecture before. So something like, we're going to define a function, which we haven't done a whole lot of yet, but the basic idea is we're going to build some reusable code that can take a piece of information that we can use for something. We're going to call it guess. Right now, we'll give it no arguments, so I'm just trying to get the structure there. Okay, so guess is going to have to take some number, right? Some number from the user or from whoever is calling this function. We're going to give it a number to do something about. So we're going to have, actual number is 10, right? The user won't know that. The person outside the function won't know that. And we're going to want to give that same kind of feedback that we saw in the lecture, right? If number, the number given by the user, in this case we're going to do greater than actual number, then we do one thing, right? Else, if number is less than actual number, we're going to do a different thing. And then finally, else, we can just leave this as default because this satisfies all the cases, right? The number can only actually be larger than, less than, or the same as. But for the sake of completeness and obviousness, let's do if the number equal actual number. All right. So yeah, we have this three-way branching if statement that says, hey, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff based on the number value that's come in. I'm going to compare it to the actual number. And I know we just jumped straight into greater than, less than stuff, but I think that's, it's probably starting to click here. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to give the same kind of feedback that we did before. Console.log to high. Console.log to low. And then, I didn't mean to tab that. Sometimes you get ahead of yourself with the tools that help you too much. Console.log, correct. All right. So every time somebody calls this function, they're going to give it a number, and it'll get, tell us whether we're good. Let's pick the number 500 just to get away from the basic number of 10. I reloaded the page so that now this function actually exists. If I do guess, it's ready. It's ready to take our number that we defined here. So I'm going to guess 10. Too low. Guess 20. Too low. Guess 1,000. Oh, wait, that's too high. Guess 450. Too low. Guess, what am I doing? Guess 500. Hey, correct. Okay. You see the concept here, though? We have enabled this function to do three separate things based on the conditions of two numbers, right? So that inherently has a lot of value. This means that we're able to make our code smarter. You can use a single function to do many different things based on a single input, right? And that the condition of that input matters to us. Another way you would do this is with like comparing strings together. We can do if car equals car I know that seems like a stupid thing, but console.log this. Okay, it did it, and then of course if we change it to cat, it won't, because car equal cat is false, because it's not the same string. Got it? Okay, so that, oh, I should do comparators. So we just did greater than and, or less than and greater than. Okay, so but we got to keep it rolling. This, I hope, illustrates the basic concept of how you can use an if statement to branch. You know, your code is flowing from top to bottom, and when it gets to the if statement, it has 3 different ways it can go from there, and it will choose one based on something that you have defined. Okay, let's get into for of loops. But actually, before I get into for of loops, I should probably get into arrays. Okay, let's go and just do, I'm going to go back to the code, but let's just do, here, I'll reload the page, clear it up a little bit. Okay, so what is an array? An array is a collection of items. X equals 1. Oh, hey, look, it's ready for me to complete it here too. Okay, X equals, this is an array of the values 1 through 10. Okay, so, and these are the indexes. To get at something inside the array, you have to access it by way of saying, hey, which address are you at? Think of an array like a city block, right? You have a collection of places that all have different things in them, and you would address them by way of their address, right? Their index in this case. So the address 0 points at the first position. Try not to get hung up on that too much. Just take it on faith. 0 makes sense in a computational sense. It's the first value, right? But it will screw you up several times. I think 90% of all errors in programming are off by 1 errors in lists and stuff. So don't beat yourself up if you make errors, but just remember that 0 is the starting point for all arrays. Okay, if I want to get the 9th value, I would go to 8, right? Because that would be 8th plus 1, because we're off by 1. Great. Let's do it again with, instead of x equals that, let's do 1. Can you guess it? No. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the string, whatever. Okay. I'm just screwing around with new various data forms, right? So an array can have whatever you want in it. In fact, okay, so one nice thing about the console is when you evaluate things in the console, it shows the damn thing. So we have in index 0, we have the string 1. In index 3, we have the number 4. Index 6, we have the string digit 7. X sub 3 gives us the 4. Okay, X sub, I say sub as in like kind of subscript, like you might in math. Oh, length is different. X sub 2. No, sorry. 2, second index, right? So this is an array. It's a simple structure. It's more complex than the single number is, but it's a relatively simple structure. It's kind of straightforward. It's just saying, hey, I'm going to put a bunch of different stuff in one spot, and I want to be able to, work. I want to be able to ask for things out of it based on a number. Let's jump back to a for of loop now. So, okay, I'm going to start putting x's on these. We've covered them in some amount of detail. We'll talk about nesting in a minute. So, for of loops. Okay, so let's say we have a value in here. So we have x, right? We have x is an array. It has 7 items in it. Let's say we want to print each one of these. Here's a very nice hint. Anytime you hear the word each in your own natural language, each of these things, that means you're probably in a good position to use a for of loop logic, right? So for each of these things, we want to print them out to the console. You know what? We can keep scrolling down. It's a little awkward to keep moving downward, but here, I'll just hit, no, enter doesn't work. Okay, so let's do a for of loop. No, I do want to go back up. I'm going to copy this. We'll make a new array. This one's dumb. This is a dumb array. Let's make a better array. X, we'll say X equals cat, dog, frog, capybara. You know I love capybara. And so on, right? We have an array of animal names. Great. And just a reminder, it's always nice to pop into the console and look at the evaluations here. So we have these 4 values. Now I could just print them all out. I can say console. Okay, actually that's a good idea. How do we get one of these values out? Well, console.log. We're gonna print it x sub the first one. We're gonna get the first value out of it, right? We printed cat to the console. Cool. Console.log x sub 1. That'll get us dog. Right. Okay. Now, if we were, I guess I will jump into a regular for loop. A regular for loop, in this case, to do this same thing. Now, a quick aside, why am I talking about printing the word cat to the log? We're just focusing on the logic for a minute. This stuff will come back when we want to do interesting things on the actual page. Okay. So just zooming into the logic, how does a for loop function? Well, let's recall a basic for loop. For, yep, here, it's helping us out. I'll just go ahead and hit tab to auto-include it. Oh, wow, look at it go. I don't necessarily need to do an %, here. I'm not sure what it was trying to do. But, okay, for I starts at 0. Okay, right? So remember, in a loop, you have to define like something to track your progress through the loop, right? And the end condition is not going to be I is less than 1,000 this time. Instead, we'll make it I is less than x dot length, right? We're going to say as long as you're less than the length of this array, keep going. And then I++ just means we're going to increase I by 1 every loop. So what do we do in that loop? Well, we're going to log x sub I. Instead of 0, right? Instead of 0 or 1 or whatever number we manually entered, we can use this variable that's going to automatically be ticking up the whole time, and we can access that element. So let's go ahead and do it. Ta-da! Cat, dog, frog, capybara. Great. Okay. So we have written a custom for loop. I'm actually going to add it to our list since we did it. For loop. And I'm going to go ahead and exit out because we're not going to stay on it. Okay, so we managed to do the thing we were trying to do, right? We were trying to take 4 of these values, and here's the trick, right? This is 4 values, but you know what would make it, the same logic would work if it was 400,000 values. In fact, x, let's see, y equals, can you do this in JavaScript? I think you might be able to do times 100. No, it's not a number. Y equals is it repeat? Hey, I'm gonna do a quick thing live. Repeat an array JavaScript. Help me look it up. Create an array with the same element repeated multiple times. Is it map really? Yeah, it seems wrong. Python does this, yeah. Fill. Oh, had a beeper. Wow, this is a lot of far too complex stuff. One of the frustrating things about jumping between programming languages is something that is basically a primitive in some languages is not always a primitive in another language. I'm just trying to get a huge, you know what? Here's what we'll do. I'm gonna snag in our script here. I'm gonna snag. So from the lab, I'm stealing something from the lab. In the lab, we use the entire Constitution. Right? It is captured in this one JavaScript array. Oh my God, whatever. You'll see what you're doing with that when you get to the lab. I'm going to import it into our HTML here, and we're going to have it available. Oh, not here. You do that by saying, hey, there's a script, and then, is it src? I believe so. Equals, and that will be up1, and then constitution.js. Okay, let's see if that actually loaded. Let me reload the page. And constitution. Great. Okay, it has it, right? It has this huge array. So many items. Oh my lord. You'll deal with them shortly. So let's do a for loop to just like print each line to the console, right? For. We're gonna do the same dang thing. Oh wait, go ahead and do that. Oh, come on, buddy. So I is less than constitution dot length, right? And we're going to console dot log constitution, same prospect, right? We're going to use the iterating variable I, the one that is constantly ticking upward as we go through our loop, and each loop we're going to say, okay, constitution dot length. Oh, right. So that's when it will stop. So until then, we have a variable that should be a viable index into this array. So we're just going to print it out. Let's go. Oh wait, why'd you blow up? Because I spelled you wrong. Constitution is how things are spelled, of course. All right, let's try it again. Boom. Whoa, look at all that. We have printed using the same logic that we used for that dumb little example. Literally the same logic, right? There is nothing different here. We just changed which array it was pointed at. So it ran through and printed all the dang things. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's reload the page, and because I want to show you, and we'll close it down. I want to show you the idea of a for of loop again. So, which we will also talk about nested indexing in this part. So, for. Now remember, a for of loop is a little different. A for of loop is a more intuitive way of thinking about this. Remember that concept of each. You know, each thing I want to do here, I'm going to do something for each entity. In this case, each thing in Constitution is a little array, right? It's a little indexed, it's a little mini array that has two objects in it, two items in it. One string for a tag name and one string containing a bunch of content, right? So at the 0th position, we have 0, and at the first position, we have this. Let's do the same thing we just did, and for line, just any arbitrary variable name, right? This is the same idea. It's instead of having a number that's ticking up, we have an object variable that holds one of the objects from the array each time we go through. So for line of constitution, we're going to say console.log line, right? Line is, again, is a variable that contains whatever is in each position of the constitution array. What should happen? Think for a sec, just to get an impression. What ought to happen? The same thing that we did on the other for loop, right? It's going to do the exact same thing. Bop. It dumped out for each item. It just printed that item. And what is the item? It's an array of length 2. So, okay. Now, that's good. I think, honestly, that kind of gets at the heart of it. For of loops are just a super concise way of saying, hey, I want to do one thing for each of these things. I have a big pile of things, and I want to do the same thing on each one of them. Okay, so let's reload the page. Let's talk a little bit about nested indexes, or nested arrays, and how to index into them. So constitution we still have access to. Let's say we want to get at the first item. So that's easy. Sub 0, right? The first item of the constitution. Great. Now, what if I want to get at one of the items inside that item? Well, we can do constitution sub 0, sub 0. And we get at, so, this piece returns whatever the item is. So this is an array, right? This object here inside constitution is a big ol' array. We can get an item out of that array using that. Now, what returns from that? Well, it's another array. It's a tiny array. It only has 2 items. We can get P out of the first thing because that's the type of thing it should be, a paragraph. If we do 1, we get the content of that. Okay, so we've got both access to both of the items just by changing the way we're indexing. If I go out of range, it's undefined. 3 is undefined, 2 is undefined, 1 is we the people, 0 is paragraph, tag name. Okay, so that's the basic concept of how you get at things. If you have multiple arrays nested, you're going to use them, in this way. Now, let's go back and revise our task with this thing to, let's say we just don't want to print out the content. We don't actually care about the header variables or anything. We just want to get at that informational content of the Constitution here. So let's do a quick for loop, the basic one for I, etc. Okay, ugh. Every time I have to do it over and over. I should probably put that, you know what? I'm going to model good behavior, and we're going to write this into a dang function instead of having to write it in the log every time. So we're going to make a new function, print const, print con. And we don't need to give it any values. We're just going to say print the things. Okay, so our first version that we're doing here is here, we'll copy it twice because we want to have 2 versions. We've been working on 2 versions. Print con for of print con for. Just a slight difference in the way that we're doing it. Also, this will help you see it all. So constitution.length. So we're trying to make sure that's the case, right? And then here. We'll deal with that one in a minute. So what are we doing again? We're logging the value inside Constitution. Oh, well, that was nice, but I don't want that. Okay, so what are we doing? So for each item, we're going to get at Constitution. And remember, in this one, we're using an index to talk about the items. So we're going to do the same thing we just did up there. Constitution sub I. So we're going to look at the ith item as I continues to rise in this for loop. But we're going to grab the second entry out of it, so index 1. So what does that mean? If we do this and we reload, I should probably delete all that because it'll blow up if we don't. If I load this, okay. If I just call print con 4, right? If we call this, it will do the same thing that's in the code over here in the function. So print con 4. If I am going to do this, what should happen? It should just print out every line of the Constitution with no, formatting information. Oh, no. I keep spelling it silly because I'm a silly boy. Reload the page. Up. Okay, good. Up still maintain the history. Print con 4. Look at that. It printed the whole dang Constitution right into the log. Okay. Now, why'd that work? Well, we did a for loop. We said, hey, I'm going to look at one number for every number up until the length of the Constitution, so it should be a valid address. I'm going to go into the Constitution at that address, but then even within that, because I know the structure, I want the second item. So I'm going to print it right out. So this works. Lovely. Let's do the same thing with the more intuitive for of. So for, again, we'll do line of Constitution. Now, we got to be a little different here, right? We're not just going to print line, console.log line. In fact, I'll show you what happens when we do that. It should do the same thing we just did, but I just want to remind you. So print con for of. Okay, it printed the whole dang object again. That's because for every iteration of the loop, line contains the whole object. So we can just go inside of it, just like we did above. We can say, give me the second item of that array. Right? Not the first one. I don't want the first one. That's a little bit chaffy. I don't need that. I want this. So reload, and we'll do print. Oh wait, I can just hit up. There we go. Look at that. So in this very succinct form, we have a function that says, hey, for each line of the Constitution that I have in that Constitution object here, defined over here, just log that line's second item, and it done did it. Wonderful. So we got to keep it going at a clip here. We've done for of loops. We've done a pretty good job with it. Let's talk about some new stuff. Okay. Properties and objects. We just talked about arrays. Arrays are quite nice. They allow us to store a bunch of information in one place, but it's sort of like arbitrarily stored. It's just like, oh, this is a bunch of mailboxes in the wall, and each one is a slot. You can put whatever the heck you want in there. There's not much labeling. There's not much anything. It's just sort of a bunch of positions, right? An object, we've already dealt with quite a lot, actually. So if we recall something like this, right? This is a div in the world. In fact, let's go give it an entity ID. ID equals stuff. And okay, so if we're gonna remember how do we get an item out of the page? We do document, so x equals document dot get element by ID out of the page, and the ID in this case is stuff. Yes. Okay, we have the object. X is that object. You can see it on the page. Cool. There's nothing here, it says. Remember, X is an HTML object, so even though it claims there's nothing here, it's full of stuff. X dot inner HTML. What is that? A new line and some text that says no, there's nothing here. X dot style. What's in that? Well, nothing's really defined for it. In fact, you see all these empty strings, but it's there, right? These are the properties of this object. So how do you do a custom object? You end up using objects quite a lot. You can build your own objects. It's as simple as this. If you've ever heard of, oh my God, where am I? Oh, I'm in the log. Let me reload. Okay, if you've ever heard of what's called hash tables or dictionaries, or in this case, objects. JavaScript land treats them all as objects. Here's an object. X equals. You do the curly brace, and you can give it names for the things that are in there. Height, 65, whatever, right? Weight, also 65. No, we'll make it a different number. 100,000. There we go. Coolness. Very. All right, stupid. Garbage. That's an object. In the exact same way that the item we pulled out of the page is an object, this too is an object. X has properties. X dot, or X, and there's two ways you can access it actually. X sub, the string height, gives us the value inside of the height. X dot height also works. These are both the same concept. There's reasons you might use each one. This is cleaner because it's literal code. But if you maybe don't know the name of the thing, you're doing this using a variable as well, then this is a good way to get them too. I bring this up just because understanding that custom objects exist and the sort of fundamental shape of an object and how to access its values and known as properties is pretty useful, especially in the lab coming. And also especially in kind of everything we do in Vue. So we'll get there. Okay, so I think that's out of the way. Again, we're focusing today on sort of the nuts and bolts pieces as opposed to the higher order things because you'll have plenty of that to do in the lab. And this is the last lab. You're meant to be sort of getting a little more independent. So, events. Let's talk about events. Okay, so events. If you didn't notice, I take quick breathers between concepts. So let's talk about the basic kinds of events that you can do that are automatically baked in to JavaScript world, or rather HTML even. Let's do a button, and the button is going to have a onClick parameter. And onClick, what will it do? Well, in this case, let's have it print conf of. Right, and then that's the button. Oh, we'll call it show me that constitution, baby. All right, so let's reload the stupid page. Okay, now we are so used to buttons. Buttons are the fundamental, like, oh, if I click upon this, it will do a thing. That's great. The truth is that that's kind of arbitrary. So if I click this button, what should happen? ta-da! It printed a damn thing. I can do it over and over. I did 100 of them. I printed a lot of the Constitution is now over here. Way too much Constitution. Nicolas Cage would be outraged. So, Constitution, blah blah blah. The thing that's happening here is when I click, this code is triggered. When I click a thing, this code happens, right? That is an event handler. And in this case, the event is isolated to when a mouse click happens and it is within the bounds of this button element. Now, it doesn't say any of that, but that's what is implied here, right? If the system produces a mouse click event at all, and it's inside this button, the bounding box of this button, which we can kind of highlight here, right? This is the button's shape, right? If the mouse is on the screen at the positions of this button within greater than this corner, but less than this corner, right? Then that triggers this specific event handler. That is what an event handler is. The idea is that, if you didn't have something watching out for events, then you would have no way to interact with a user, right? A user lives in a totally different time scale than these things, right? These things print to the screen in a billionth of a second, and then they're done, and they sit there and wait an eternity. When you come along, you produce event objects that the system then tries to use for things. So let's do our own custom event. Let's actually, and I'm not going to print on it, keep these things in my dang head. Of course I don't. So, event handler mouse click JavaScript. Click event, sure. Let's do a quick look. Wait, who are you? Develop Mozilla. That's a trustable place. So, how do we make our own event listener? So, mouse event is a type of object, and what it has various properties, like where was it in space? Where was it in terms of its X position and its Y position? That seems like a good one. Let's drag that out. So let's grab this code, and we're going to just dump it right into our script here. Okay, they use a strange... I don't need this to be event into a function. I think I'm just going to do... We're going to define our own function, right? So we're going to build a function called mouse clicked, okay? And it needs to take one argument, which is the event object, okay? So add event listener. Oh wait, is that actually? This is where my expertise actually shines in. So I recall now, it's actually, you have to say the window object. You know how we have the document object that we use all the time for things like document.getElementById? The browser also has a window object, which helps us do things at the window level, like, with tabs and bookmarks and things like that. So this is saying window. So if you click the mouse inside this window, there is an event listener waiting for a event with the name click, or rather the type click. Then we're going to say... I think I can just get rid of this and make it mouse clicked, right? So, function mouse clicked. It's going to take the event, and we can do something with it. So let's say, you know what? Let's see if we can grab one of these events real quick. We'll do one on the fly. Add event listener, and we're going to say click, and then we're going to say. Trying to figure out how to catch this easily. Maybe we don't. Maybe we just go ahead and finish writing it. So let me reload the page because it's getting clogged with Constitution. Here's what we'll do. Console.log. We're just going to log the entire dang event. So first we got to check and see if what I did actually works, right? So why is this not going to be cluttered? Well, because these functions are just written and they're not going to do anything. This actually runs, this code actually executes, right? This says, okay, window, you need to add an event listener now. So as soon as the page loads, this script will run, these functions will be defined, and then we will say, oh, let's add an event listener for this thing. And to be a little more clean, let me put my functions all in the same region. Okay, so what should happen? We define all these functions, and then we say at the end, hey, window, if you ever get an event called click, do this function. Okay, let's see if it works, if I'm not a silly boy. Aha! It did it. Hang on, let me delete this. It's just in the way. So I clicked inside the window. What happened is this event listener said, aha, I have found an event that the system generated for me. I'm going to pass it along to this function. So this function takes the event. I just named it E right here, and I just logged the whole dang thing. Let's see what's going on inside there. Oh my, look at all this. It has all these features, all these properties, you would say. It has positions. Okay, so there's a lot. There's maybe too much going on. Let's just kind of grab the X and the Y out of it. So I'll reload, get the log cleaned. Oh, wait, is there a way to do that that's like super simple? Clear console. Yeah, nice. I'll stop reloading for that. Okay, so we want to so instead of just logging the whole dang thing, let's actually just log x or e.x and e.y, right? So that event had a position, and we can now reload. Pop, 158, 157, 330, 328. What's up here? 25. Oh, it's right here. So it's actually based on the corner. It's based on the actual active window. Aha! I found the origin. Yes, I clicked the exact corner. Awesome. Now I'm going to click way down here. We can see how big the page is. It's about 435 width by 884 height. Great. So you see that the system is able to take information from a user's action, and this is kind of the whole thing that we're talking about here. There is data underlying anything that you do on a page, right? If I click here, it's not just a single click that's like super, oh yeah, of course, a mouse click. Nah, dog, it's quite a bit. I'm going to log the entire thing, and we're going to see it again. It has so many features, right? Was it in motion? Where is it relative to the page? Where is it relative to other elements? There are different ways, different layer things that it might be responding to. If I click inside here, it might have a different relative position to this object than it does to the whole page. There are so many things that are considered important about a single little click in time, like an instantaneous moment in time where I go pop, pop, pop. You get it? So you can do a similar thing with the keyboard, and that's what you'll actually do in the lab. So let's do, just real quick, we'll add another one just to show it live. Key down. I think it's just lowercase like that. And we're going to do function key pressed. And another event, right? And console.log E. We'll just log E, just like we did. Reload the page. If I hit now something on my keyboard, I believe, if memory serves, that this will trigger the same kind of event. Look at that. A keyboard event was found, and it was printed right out to the log. Some of the most important things that you'll want to pay attention to are code. Key is also fine. We have the type, which is what was used to determine if this was the thing, right? And so let's say I want to print console.log e.code, console.log e.key. Both of those should be the same. Up, up. Wait, did I break it? Did I not save that? What did I do wrong? Reload the page. No. Wrong area. Undefined. Oh no. What have I done wrong here? So that's actually kind of like slightly interesting. I'm not sure why. So if I have one of these events and I have arrow left, code, arrow left. Huh. What if I just do it? Okay, something's not reloading. It's not reloading properly. Because I don't even have, I'm a little baffled. Is this the wrong page? Did I screw something up? I'm going to pause real quick. Aha! A fool as I. What have I done wrong? Take a moment, if you haven't already figured it out and we're screaming at the screen, and think about what have I done wrong. In fact, pause the video. Okay, whether or not you figured it out, here's the problem. I added a window.event listener for click, right? And I said when I get a click, mouse clicked, log, or send it to this function. You can see in the editor what's wrong. This is not ever called. I have to do it properly by calling the actual function. Okay. Aha! It is functioning. Yes, yes, yes. Arrows, all the letters, semicolon, quote, back quote. Oh, it doesn't like me. It doesn't want to do shifting. That's interesting. Digit 1, digits, keys, spacebar, control left, control right, alt, right? So, oh, that one's not working. That's interesting. Oh, gross. Never mind. I think when I hit alt, it sort of changes something about the interface. So, okay. So that's listeners, right? You have this way of setting up these little passive guys, little dudes that are listening, right? They're listening for system events. Your operating system is sending information to this page all the time. And if you're clever, you can figure out, ooh, I would like to catch an event and use it for something, which you will do in the lab. Okay, that's enough on event listening. Now we got to cover some view before I take too much of your day. Okay, to start, let's have a look at this example that I have found. That it's a little tricky to dive right in, but we're going to do it. So remember that the whole point of Vue.js is to be a system to help us kind of separate, well, not totally separate, but like separate the idea of what the viewable space is for the user and the data model in the background. Now, that will make more sense if we look at an example. So here is from Vue.js.org. This is the main site. Here is a simple example of, well, actually, I guess we could go to Hello World first. Okay, here is a dead simple web page. And now this is just a piece of text on a page, right? Over here is the actual web page. We have the code over here. This is, sorry, I was distracted by something. This is the sort of the most basic example you can do. Now, in HTML land, we would just write a p tag, that says paragraph, or maybe this is actually a header. H1 hello world, right? And it would be done, and we would be done. We'd be ready to go. We'd be fine, and we can reload this page. Look, we did it. We did the same thing. But we had to hard code that. We had to say, this is a tag, and this is its content. And it can never change, right? This is the experience that is programmed into this page, and we can change it, but that would involve a lot of things like, for example, document.getElement. Well, there's not going to be a, maybe we can get it element by tag name. All right. And we'll try and get H1. I think it's got to be capital. I'm not sure. It's not a function. How dare you? All right, we're going to skip this. So, but you get the point, is that this is an HTML object, and it would take us a lot of finicky stuff to get it to maybe change on the fly, right? If I do, here, I'll give it an ID. ID equals hello, or let's call it HW. Hello world. All right, so reload, and we'll do document.getElement by ID, and we'll get our HW item. Okay, so we can grab it, right? But we can also do inner HTML equals banana, as always. Okay, so we're not lost in the woods if we want to dynamically change things in a web page without, having to adopt some special framework to do that. But the whole point of these frameworks, like Vue.js, is that they do it much more seamlessly and easier. So, let's see. That's better. Composition? No, we're not trying to do composition. We're trying to do. Don't focus too hard on the actual. There's some things here that I don't want us to use because they're a little more complex. They involve building the app in a different way. But look here. The two things to pay attention to here are there is a script here, right? And the script has it's importing something from the Vue package, okay? But it's creating an app object. So it creates an app object, and there is a data function. They use this kind of strange way, but the key thing is data points to a list of object variables, right? And ultimately, we then call this mount function to mount this whole app object here onto something on the page. In this case, it's the div. It's a simple little area over here named app, okay? And look at this. We have this interesting little curly braces notation. This means instead of whatever text you might put in here hard-coded, for example, this in our world over here, we're instead going to bind this. This is called a binding. So this is our front end. This is the actual thing that's visible over here. And we can put bindings in to connect this piece of the front end to some data in the back. So now we have, if you look here, says message between the curly braces. That means you look for the variable message in the app's data section. Hello world. I wonder if it'll change on the fly. I don't think it will. Oh, it kind of updates. Yeah. Happy birthday, right? So, okay, we have this front end thing. This is what's being displayed, but as soon as the information is changed in the data of the app, which is the kind of stuff you would do all the time if you were writing some kind of script to do interesting stuff, right? It updates it, right? It instantly changes it. So that's like the core concept, and that's also we've now touched on the front end and the back end, so the model and the view, right? So this is the model, this is the data, and this is the view, and the controller. So remember MVC, right? MVC that's what Vue.js is doing for us. It's helping us connect the front and back end, right? So a moment. Let's get this back over here, and I will show. Oh, you know what? I can continue on and show you one that will use some of the stuff we just did. Okay, so here we have. Here's another app. Here's another Vue.js app, right? We have a script, and we have a div object, right? The div is the app, the front end, the view, and the script is the data, the information, right? So we have, in the data section of this particular app, we have show is a Boolean variable that has true in it, okay, that we can sort of start to infer what that means. And we have a list that has 3 items in it. Okay, so we build the data end, and we mount it to the app, using this notation. You'll see a different notation in the future one. There's a lot of valid ways to do it. They're still getting their head around the preferred best practices way to do certain things. We're going to use a little bit older way. So this is the app, right? We have the div app. We have a bunch of buttons up here, and let's see. When I click this button, we're going to change the value of show in the app, right? So @click means, hey, do this in a Vue.js way. You have, click statement. Oops. You have access to the Vue.js model, right? So when I do click, instead of the kind of like having to run a very specific piece of JavaScript code like we did over in our friend here, right? We said on click, print con for a blah blah blah, right? Instead, we're just kind of talking about variables that the system knows exist inside the app, right? We have show and we have list. They're just ready. So what is this saying? If I click toggle list, then I should change show. Show should equal the opposite of show, right? Because a not Boolean variable, right? So if this is true, not true would be false, and it will then be set there. Okay, what does that mean? Before we go through all the rest of these, what does that mean here? So let's look at our list. UL, so unordered list, that's this guy. VIF, aha, a VIF binding. That's interesting. Let me get back to our concepts list. That's an important one. We talked a little bit about mustache. You'll see it again. So this will display, this means that this whole object will only be displayed if something is true. So this one says we're only going to show the list if both show is true, right? So the show variable has to be set to true, and the list length has to be non-zero. In this case, they're using it. If it was 0, it would evaluate to false. So let's try one. If I hit toggle list, that should invert this variable. It's gone. So instead, we display this one. If list.length, list is empty but not empty but is hidden. Okay. So let's keep exploring this. I want to make sure it all gels together for you. So what this is doing is changing the information inside the app on the back end, right? We say, hey, change this variable. Let's do another one. This one is list.push. Okay, so this is saying the list variable. Let's push a new item onto it. That's something that all lists have, all arrays have in JavaScript, that allows you to add a new item. So essentially it's just saying like do the next number. It's saying like take the length and add another one. So let's do push number. Aha. Now, this button only changes the data, right? This is only changing the data inside the app. The reason that this continues to populate the web page, the HTML side, is that we're using a v-for in the list items. Ooh. Oh, welcome back to for loops. Interesting. So what does v-for mean? If I have an element that has, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It can be any element. In fact, I could make this into paragraph instead, just real quick to show you. Okay, instead of a list, we've just got a bunch of paragraphs. Same thing is happening. Okay, so push and pop mean like add something and remove something. Okay, so what does this mean? P. Okay, we've got an element that we're building. v-for. So for each item of list being our thing up here, right? Create a paragraph for it. And then inside the paragraph, bind the text to the item. Now, notice item is not one of our data variables here. Item is defined right here, just like inside of a for loop, right? You can say, hey, build me as many of these things as we have. That's what we're saying here. Let's change it back to a list item because it's a little cleaner. Cool. Oh, didn't mean to save the page. So used to editing code and saving. Haha. Okay, push, pop. Okay, so we have this scenario where the list will only display under certain conditions, and this list item will generate as many of them as it needs to finish the entire list. Push. What else do we have? Oh, I guess we can pop until there's nothing left in it. The list is empty now. Okay, so if I push a number, you see now that, so list is empty is the default situation. So we're also seeing v-if, this condition, v-else if, a different condition, v-else. We've got both if statements and for loops captured right here in HTML front-end world. So now we're able to do these things that will dynamically change the page based on things we do exclusively to the back end. Let's cover these real quick again. Show equals not show. That means it's invert the Boolean variable between true and false. Flip it, toggle it back and forth. List.push means add a new item. List.pop means remove the last item. And list.reverse, which we haven't looked at yet. What do you think that'll do? Oops, I didn't mean to pop. My mouse slipped under me. Aha! We changed the data. The page changed. Reverse, 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 reverse as many times as we want. Push, 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 push. Reverse, push, 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 push. Ah. Oh, it's getting messy because we've reversed and then added new items onto the end. Aha. But that's great. I mean, we're seeing now the data is shifting around. We're doing lots of things to change it with JavaScript code, little bits of JavaScript code, and it's keeping up. It's keeping up with us. That is kind of the core point of why you want to have a framework like this. Because once you start to do interesting things that are a little bit more complex, you want to have this reusable concept of, okay, I can safely guarantee that when I change the information, the front end will behave in this way. I don't have to build a bunch of lookup functions to help me go and like find document.getElement by ID. Oh, let me check what's inside of it. Oh, if it's this value, change it to this value. Ooh, has this changed since it's been updated? Blah, blah, blah. You can just rely on the framework to handle all the middleman stuff. Okay. Moved around a little bit. So, let's revisit our list. We've got the basics of an app object. We talked a little bit about data. We haven't talked about methods, but you know what? Objects, you can define methods for the app in the same area here. We'll do one shortly. We won't cover created. That's less important. But we talked about VIF. You can see how you could make conditional elements. We talked about V4. We haven't talked about style, but by the time you get to the lab, you'll understand it. The point of all these being that any tag, any tag attribute that you can use, you can bind some of that tag to the data inside the Vue app. So, for example, an image, you can actually bind the source, right? So when you do an image, it's something like, open this specific image from this specific location, right? Well, when you define that location, it's a string, right? Well, in this case, you could bind that string to be built by some JavaScript as opposed to just being hard-coded. So, you know what? I think that's actually good. I'll take a moment and find some more interesting examples here, but we'll do one more thing before I go. Okay, I have landed on the idea that we should just recover the same thing we saw in the lecture, but a little more guided here now that we've learned some things. So, yeah, we're just going to look at this funky boy. This is the same thing we saw in the lecture. This is a few different things on the front and several things in the back, right? We have the idea of I can adjust the values, and we see over here the data is being dumped out directly to the screen on the web page in this case. That's just to help us out, right? This is to help us visualize what's happening in the back end. So we have a label for each item and a value for each item, and they're getting used here. This is, we haven't actually talked about this. This is an SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics. They are super useful, super cool. In a future iteration of this course, I would definitely love to get into it. But essentially, it's like, you know how you can draw on a canvas in the sense of like, if you're drawing digital art, right? You open Paint and you can draw directly on the canvas. But more like if you're writing text, for example, it's not like point by point drawing this onto a place. It's scalable. You can zoom in on it. The idea here is then that these objects are easy to move around. They're just vectors that you can change the position of, right? This is a line that is automatically filled. So we create a scalable vector object. Ooh, can I get the inspector open here? And look at that. Look at that. Here's our SVG, right? And this is one of the pieces, right? We see it over there on the left. This is our SVG entity. And what is it bound to? It is bound to stats. Interesting. Okay. We have this polygraph entity now, this polygraph element. This is something that is imported from elsewhere. Now, we can go diving in pretty deep. View is intentionally supposed to be decomposable. So instead of defining everything on one page, you can have multiple chunks that are defined, right? So I guess really quick, let's look at this polygraph, see if we can understand it. So this is the basic item. We have a polygon and it has a list of points. Okay, so the points are bound to the points data object. Do we see that here? We don't. This is where it might get a little bit hairy. So stat is stat, index is index. I think the data is coming from somewhere else. So, aha, we have stat is stat with labels and such here. We'll just carry on. Pardon me. So, however they're doing it exactly, this is a fairly in-depth example. They are manipulating this vector graphic on the fly. They are changing its properties so that these dimensions line up with the number values in the data model, right? And we're able to change anything we want. We can draw blah, blah, blah. And let's see, what else do we have? We have the controls. Okay, this is a v-for. Okay, so for each stat in stats, okay, we have our stats. We have for each one of them, okay, so for each stat in stats, we take one of the stats, label A, value 100. Aha, label A, value 100. Let's see what is all inside this div. So for each control, we do one of these. One has a label, stat dot label. Okay, stats. So this is one stat per stats. Okay, so one line of this is a stat, and we can get at its label value and put that right here in a label. Let me hover over it. A label. Look at that. We can look at an input that has a slider. Okay, so type is range of this input here, and the vmodel, another binding here, stat.value. Okay, value, wonderful. So as these values all change, everything is updated, right? So the minimum value is 100, or minimum is 0, max is 100. Span. Okay, so this is going to give us the, okay, so this is where we visualize the value as a number that we can change. That's what vmodel is helping us do as well. When this input changes, it's not just things that are being pushed out to the viewable side, it's also from the viewable side I can push things into the data model, right? So every time this input bar changes, stat.value is updated down here in the code. So the span will display it, but so does the bar itself. And we see that it does change whenever I move the bar, right? Same here, because they're all bound to the same back-end piece of information. You don't have to define 7 variables that all are trying to keep each other updated. They all look here to get A's value. Cool. Then we have a button. This button does some trickery to remove a stat. Okay, so we can look at the remove stat function. It is this, so we give it a stat. If the stat's length is greater than 3, then we can, I guess what this is doing, you can remove one of these entities. Okay, so if we delete too many, it breaks. I'll delete as many as we can. Yeah, can't delete more. Okay, we see that. The alert pops up if this.stats.length is too short. Can't delete anymore. Okay. But if I can, then it uses the splice function, which I guess helps to chop a list up in such a way. It's like everything up until the defined item, and then everything after the defined item, just recompile those into a new list. Let me add another stat. As always, bananas. Oh, it's ugly. But look at it doing it. It's great. It looks like the SVG itself also uses these list labels, which is cool. I can slide it around. Wonderful. And yeah, so we also have this add. Okay, so this was the add that I just did. So form ID add. So when I hit this button or hit enter, it will add a new element as long as it has something in there. So input, the name is new label, the V model is new label. Okay, do we have a, yes, we have, there is no new label by default, it is just an empty string. So when I get in here, if I hit this button, it calls the add function. Okay, the add method. So we saw the remove method, we saw how that worked. Let's do a quick run through the add method. So what is add doing? Add is saying, it looks like it's using an event. So it's relying on some kind of event that was triggered. That's good. If this.new label, so if we don't have a new label at all, in fact, if I have typed the, so this is bound together, right? So new label starts out empty. Every time I type here, then this will get updated with a new label. When we're ready to actually add the new stat, like that, gross, awful, we check, hey, is there anything in new label? If so, well, first of all, if not, then return just ends the function now, and we don't do anything else. Okay. Otherwise, though, we will push, as we learned, that's like adding a new thing to the list here, to the array. We'll push a new entity. Okay, look, it's a new object, just like these are. It's a label with this.new label and a value of 100. Is that what happens when we add a thing? Thing, add the stat, the value starts at 100, the label is set to thing, we're good. And then at the end of it, we clear the new label so that there's nothing left, and this goes back to nothing. If we got rid of that part, I'll just comment it out. And I did that. Oh, I keep saving, jeez. And I hit add stat, it will add it, but look, it's still there. That value, we can just keep adding over and over. That's bad, we don't want that, get out of here. Y'all are the worst. So, let's fix that. I've done it again. So, that gets us kind of through it all. Oh, and this is the raw object. So this is what's called a pre. A pre is it's a way of displaying text like raw without it doing a bunch of like adding white space and stuff. Very good for displaying code. So it's this little chunk of stuff, and all it does is just dumps the entire stats object. Oh wait, this object called stats, right? It just dumps it straight out in a JSON format. So look, I mean, we can see it literally is the exact like look of it. It's the brackets for the array, and each one of these is a little object. And that's it. This is the basic idea. I would love to get more into depth here, but that would kind of be lost on both you and me at this point. So there's more to learn there. But yeah, so this is a deeper dive into this same little app. I hope you're starting to see how this creates a much more dynamic and interesting experience for a user, especially if you're trying to build something useful, like, for example, Spotify's web page, web player, right? I mean, this is a web app, right? This is a tool that can play music right here. It's being populated by things that are in the background. I'm glad I don't think I'm logged in. Good. You're not seeing my music taste. You get generic music taste. Instrumental study. That's not going to give us a demo, is it? Fine, whatever. But you see what I mean. Like, this is not something they have hard coded. These are elements. These are components in a web development framework. Probably React. Everybody's using React these days. I like Vue because it's open source. But I mean, this is a way you can compose a website that has functional stuff. I mean, if I click on this, something happens, right? Oh, we can even browse. This is almost certainly some sort of V4, right? There are this many items in the list in the back end. Wow, there's a lot. How many do we get? Hundreds. And then each one of these has different data associated with it that's quite important. It has a button that will start playing the track, right? All in the same way that this is happening. So that's where I'll leave it. We'll kill Spotify, we'll kill our Vue.js examples, we'll kill my web page, and we'll get back here. And that's it. I think that puts you in a place where you can at least get your head around what's happening in the apps in the lab, and I also hope it puts you in a place where you have a stronger understanding of all this. And with that, we're at an hour and 15, so I'll let you to it. Enjoy, take care, and thanks for coming along.